All right, here are Cornell notes for reference. It's page 56 in the TCI. Let's go. So your essential question is at the top, and it's also the location in the book. So Unit 1, Lesson 4, Section 2. And the essential question is, how did feudalism establish order? And then, of course, in the column here, you can do dates, you can do all kinds of things. I'm going to do the Avid style where we actually have questions and then we answer those when we do our notes in the main notes. And then, of course, you have the summary on the bottom. If your notes spill over to the back or another page, then you just do one summary. Here are the questions that I want you to answer as we go through the notes. I'm not going to do this all the time, but we're going to do it right now. So, what was feudalism in Western Europe? And then you want to skip some lines. Again, you're putting this question in the column. What were the class levels of feudalism? Describe each level of feudalism. And I'm going to have you watch a video so you can put some notes on the video in these Cornell notes. All right. What was feudalism? The one that I had you write in the column there was what was feudalism in Western Europe. I just shortened it. And a term that I'm going to use often is vassal, and that just means a subordinate position. Anyone can be a vassal, okay? It's just the position. So feudalism, it's an economic and social system based on promises and loyalty. And so this image here is showing a lord paying homage, or here's another term that you won't really hear a lot, but fealty, and that is paying homage or promising that I'm going to, keep up my end of the bargain. Okay, the king he owns all the land theoretically, except for church land, but the king can't inhabit all this land, and so he subdivides it, and then the lords subdivide the land even further. So because the king owns land, he's going to give what's called fiefs, which are land grants to the lords in exchange for loyalty and military aid when needed. And so when this lord here is kneeling and paying fealty to the king, he's promising that he will be loyal, and in times of need, he'll send his best knights to fight for the king. Here's an example of what a king fiefdom may look like, where all of these lords have a little piece of land here, and then they subdivide it up their own way. What were the class levels of feudalism? And so you've got at the bottom you've got peasants, but you even divide that up. There's serfs, which are lesser peasants, and they can't leave the land. Whereas peasants, they rent the land from the lord. They are vassals to the lord, and you could say that the serfs could be the vassals to the peasants. In this example, you've got the knights actually, okay, and the knights are vassals to the lords. They own the land, but if the lord is like a bigwig, he might subdivide his land and give pieces to various knights. It just depends on how much land they own. And then the lord, of course, is the vassal to the king. Most lords and wealthier knights lived on manors or large estates. So this would be an example. You have the manor house, and that's where the lord or the knight would live. Most manors are going to be out in the country, and they're pretty self-sufficient. They don't really need anything else because they have everything they need. You can see water flowing here. This one actually has like a factory. using a water wheel. Inside there's a machine that will ground grain into flour, and that's probably what they are hauling out here. Of course, they've got crops, and depending on the lord or the knight, they might subdivide and rent out, this area for a peasant to harvest, and then in exchange for living and protection, the peasant has to give some of their crops to the lord. But depending on how much land, a lord might even have its own little church there. All right, so here's a little bit more detail about the levels of feudalism. Here are all of them. This particular graphic is actually using different terms. Instead of king, it's monarch. It's the same thing. Tenants in chief, these are just people that are owning the land, and that's lords and bishops. These subtenants here are knights and lesser clergy, and then you've got the peasantry here. Let's see the monarch, though, the king. So they gave the land to the tenants in chief, who paid rent in the form of loyalty, fealty, and military support. Then the lords, they have knights that'll serve, in this particular case, 40 days, but it just depends on the king or the monarch. And also they will give money, and a lot of times it'll be, in times of need, crops. It just depends. Then you've got the knights or lesser clergy, and they receive land from the lords or bishops, and in exchange they're going to fight for the king, or they're going to pray for his success, and they're going to guard or protect the person who owns the land that they're subleasing the land from. And then, of course, you got the peasants, and they're going to work the land for both a knight or a lord, and they're also going to work the land for their own crops, and they're going to pay in the form of crops. And in exchange, they are protected, they have a place to live, and you can even, like I mentioned before, have a serf being even lower than a peasant because they can't leave. All right, I'm going to have you watch this video that's going to be attached to the assignment as well on what was feudalism. There, it may give you a little bit more detail.